Howdy. I could do an intro, or we can. Now, while this song, Admire the Architecture, is written in the third person perspective, third person being not Janine or not Sylvia, that being Janine, that being Sylvia, we're just going to get that clear off right off the bat. That is who Leech Pearson is. It's in the same third person perspective as Harry Potter is written, where it's not talking about any one character specifically, but it's mostly talking about Janine. I think I said that correctly. And right here is her descent into madness. In Burn Pygmalion, A Better Guide to Romance, there is two acts, I guess you can call them. First act consisting of Community Gardens, Death Thrice Drawn, Do You Believe Me, Janine, or Janine, Pygmalion, Starstruck, Your Vicious Kin, and then partway Admire the Architecture. Act 2 consists of Admire the Architecture still, Sylvia's Just a Dying Fad, Janine, You're a Tragedy, Emotional Vagrant, Sleepyhead, Wrath of the Termite King, No Leverage, No Pleasure, Crushed Out on Soda Beach, and Bets Against the Void. Those uh-huhs simulate Janine's descent and downfall into madness and chaos that is Sylvia's Just a Dying Fad, Janine, You're a Tragedy, and eventually Emotional Vagrant. Although, the line I want to talk about isn't with her descent just yet. An exhibitionist. I could also talk about the music and the way that it simulates the airiness and dreariness of a countryside air, but I won't because who cares? Next song. Crushed Out on Soda Beach. Sorry, I was going to say Bets Against the Void. Crushed Out on Soda Beach is the second to last song in the album, and it is, at least in my opinion, because there is different, as Liz Layman says, there are different ways to interpret this album, which is really freaking confusing, but I love a challenge. Crushed Out on Soda Beach is Sylvia. It's a love song. You know, it's a love song for this certain type of love, which I could talk about here, but I'm not, because we're going to talk about this line. Voyeuristic, specifically voyeuristic spirits. Now, we're not going to talk about how I got here and how I learned what these words were. Someone told me to take a test, and I did. Dear heavens, those results were weird. These aren't my results, by the way. These were if you know the test, you know the test. I guess that's what she told me. But this was like at the bottom of it. I'm like, what the frick is this? So I learned these two words because when I saw these words, I'm like, these sound familiar. Exhibitionist is someone who enjoys showing their naked body or a sexual activity to other people, consensually, of course. And a voyeur, or a voyeuristic spirit, enjoys watching the nakedness or sexual activity of other people, consensually, of course. Now, with these two specific peeps, there's some issues that come with that. For example, if Sylvia is an exhibitionist, where she enjoys being the naked and whatever, that can cause some problems with not problems with the story, but more of just different interpretations of it. For example, or not for example, I probably should explain with sexual stories if you don't know. Sylvia is that red one. Janine is that green one. Thank you. One of them is a journalist. That is Janine. And one of them is a rising star. That is Sylvia. Janine builds Sylvia, basically. Similar to how Pygmalion, a Greek dude I think it was, where he was like, none of the women here are sexy, so I'm gonna build my own sexy lady. So he gets some stones, some chisels, he carves up a sexy lady, and then she falls into the river, he follows after her, and he dies. That's Pygmalion. Janine kind of builds Sylvia to be the perfect media star, or like a superstar. I forgot what the specific word that they use, or she uses in this album, but she builds her to be the most perfect star. In the second half of the album, Sylvia leaves Janine aside in order to actually prove to herself that she built the stardom herself and wasn't because of Janine. And it doesn't work. So that could mean that Janine built her like built her to be an exhibitionist. She built her to flaunt around her nakedness, which also, speaking of exhibitionist and whatnot, being the naked one and whatever, she's the only one wearing clothes. Which is, I'm not saying like it's a bad thing. I'm just saying in terms of trying to figure out who is who and deciding which one is Janine, which one is Sylvia, because they don't explicitly mention the green one is this one. It's been pretty freaking difficult. I assume this one is Sylvia, my evidence, because gold wristband right there, if you cannot see it, yeah. Pearls, like Batman in the Batman series, and also the red dress. I don't know, it's associated with something fancy or high class, whatever, and then Janine's on fire, which won't be talked about now. But if she is an exhibitionist, if she likes to flaunt around the nakedness and whatever, then all of Janine's anxieties and stresses that come in with Sylvia's just dying fat and Janine, you're a tragedy, and eventually emotional vagrant, are 100% valid, where she's like, why? And then voyeuristic spirits is in reference to those who like to watch the radio disrupted by voyeuristic spirits and whatnot, when she's like proclaiming the law, basically tossing them aside or whatever. But I don't think... Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. It's not like Sylvia's like, look at my body or whatever. There's an Unisonus there, reference there somewhere. No, it doesn't matter. It's a Markiplier makes reference with Ethan. Anyhow, it's not meant to be taken in a literal sense. When it says exhibitionist, it means not necessarily that she like showing off her naked body or sexual activity or to other people. It could be more of just this part, the enjoy showing off, I guess, or whatever. It doesn't have to necessarily be naked body or sexual activity, because this is music. Everything's metaphorical or whatever. Let's go back to... Sorry, there you go. Some of the lines, too, to get here. I don't think it's literal she's an exhibitionist. She's something of an exhibitionist. She is something close to that because that is what she built. This is Janine's anxieties and fears kind of peeking out, where she's like, uh-oh, I created the most sexy being alive. What the frick's gonna happen? And what stuff happens is Sylvia's just a dying fad. Janine, you're a tragedy, and emotional vagrant eventually. But the lines I want to talk about is conflicts and mysterious, because she loves her or whatever. And then for this one, voyeuristic. Okay, you could take this as a literal sense. I'm not, because explaining this to, like, I don't know, my parents it's gonna be really freaking confusing. So I'm not. Instead, I'm gonna say it's someone who enjoys watching. Nakedness doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, let me strip down or enjoys watching the strippage down happening. It could be nakedness as a nakedness of a person. Like, she is completely open about everything. In fact, the most open I think that it is, or the most open description we get, is in Janine, You're a Tragedy. Pardon me while I turn on this light. Let me find this little chapter. Found it. So, in Janine, You're a Tragedy. Does it make you feel good, made it when you leave me? Can't score an artist they peeved for the balls he threw for charity. Still distract from all the tragedy. That's not because she's being an a-hole. That's just because she was an a-hole. There's another line too. Yeah, bitter. I feel some insecure. When you said you left the podium, it does help to reassure. I hate how scratched up my CD is. Anyhow, that is that. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, correct me, please.